We know that we're wasting 1/3 of our food, and our food accounts for 1/3 of greenhouse gas emission. So you can see all this together. The food waste, food loss can account for 10% of greenhouse gas emissions. It's a big job to do. I think this is a big share. The global food banks can help to push, reduce food waste loss, reduce carbon emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, to make sure that our planet's temperature will not rise beyond 2 degrees, and help millions, maybe even billions of people to solve their hunger and malnutrition issue.
So today's sessions are all about kind of the challenges posed by food loss and waste, and more importantly, the opportunities that many different players can have in preventing and reducing food loss and waste across the supply chain. I think that we're seeing definitely a greater recognition that the challenges of climate and of food systems are interconnected. And alongside this climate crisis that we are facing, we are also facing a significant humanitarian crisis. So today we want to talk about smart solutions that can address both of those things and what that means kind of for the planet and for people. So we're excited to kick off the first session, which is called the Methane Factor, the role of food loss and waste in cutting emissions. And I'm very pleased to welcome to give introductory remarks Marcelo Mena, the CEO of the Global Methane Hub. And we at GFN, Marcelo, are so grateful to have a partnership with you specifically to look at how food redistribution can play a role in mitigating methane emissions. Please.
Thank you so much, and I wanted to congratulate Food Banking Network for this first ever Food Loss and Waste Day. I think it's a really great idea that we're doing this today. I just wanted to speak a little bit on the methane challenge. If you're not in the methane world, half of the warming, 0.5 degrees of the warming that we've experienced to date, if we are reaching the 1.5 degree already threshold, the fastest way to reduce that warming will be mitigating methane in the short term. We'll get twice the temperature reduction than decarbonization alone. And it's really not about delaying action on fossil fuels. As you've seen all the action and all the commitments, all the satellite verifications that will be set up for the lowering emissions in the energy sector. But this moment is really important. And I just want to also reflect that it's important for us, but we are aware that this can be taking a lot of space from other people's agendas, and we are aware of that. But really, it allows many of your agendas to be rising to the top, because the food loss and waste agenda has been very important for many, many years. But the fact that you have the mitigation benefit today is something that could help, be a priority measure for the COPs to come, including Brazil. So we put together the Low Methane Partnership, which was with the CCAC and others, which is really important. The waste map, which really put a spotlight on the problem. I think it was really important that we pointed out that these landfills were causing so much pollution, and that we needed then to start thinking about the solutions. And some of them were organic waste management, but certainly the food banking agenda is very important in terms of prevention, because as many know, around half of the emissions of the food system come from food that nobody ever eats. It's not only the decomposition of the waste, but it's all the energy that you lost. And if you think about it and double click on it, a lot of it's dairy and meat. So like if we're able to reduce the dairy and meat loss, I think the emission reductions are even higher than we would expect. There is a problem, though, that I think we need to be looking into, it, which is the food loss and agenda is caught between a whole bunch of responsibilities. Internally for us, it was also a thing. Is it the program director from agriculture or the program director from waste that needs to oversee this problem? And this also happens in ministries. Who is the food loss and waste champion in government? Is it the environment minister? Is it the ag minister? Is it the economy minister? We need those champions, because today, for example, in Chile, there's a discussion on the food banking regulation, and it's stuck in the health ministry, health commission. And of course, the health, they have also a lot of things to do, but if they only see it in terms of as a sanitary problem, we're really missing out on opportunities, and we really need those champions. Well, first off, the Target 16 COP CVD was really important because it's a biodiversity benefit, but also it's a food security action. It's a social justice action, and it has all the elements to be supported by countries regardless of what other countries do on mitigation, because the benefits are felt where the action is taken and the communities that are served with this type of work. So the food banking regulations, we really need to be having a better clarity of what needs to be done. Are we going to have model, we're doing some funding for some of in different settings and could be replicated everywhere, because I think it's something that we need to be doing everywhere. But for example, one reflection I have myself is, why don't we use extensive producer responsibility frameworks, which are already very mandatory to do this? You have companies having to collect recycling, e-waste, and other things. Why do we want to just settle for having companies declare Scope 3 emissions when you have something mandatory at hand, like an extended producer responsibility regulation? Many of you have been working in this space for decades, and we should have done a lot more a long time ago. But now we have the climate agenda that really needs the food loss and waste agenda to succeed. And that's why, again, I wanted to congratulate you for setting up this day on food loss and waste, and it'll be a great day. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Marcelo. Great framing for the first session. I now wanted to invite up two colleagues that are going to be in conversation. First will be Ana Catalina Suarez Pena. She is the Senior Director for Strategy and Innovation at the Global Food Banking Network. And of course, Andy Jarvis, who's the Director of the Future of Food at the Bezos Earth Fund, to chat a bit more about the opportunity and solutions in the sector. Thank you.
Hola, buenos días. Hi, good morning, everyone. Andy, nice to see you here. Buenos días.
Buenos días.
Can we speak in Spanish? I can. I will feel more comfortable. Andy, the food transition is in the agenda at the COP more than ever, and there is a connection with the food loss and waste. Why is food loss and waste a critical part of the food transition? What are you seeing?
First of all, everything that Marcelo said, I've been following Marcelo around. I've been stalking him. We're in most sessions together, but Marcelo always gets the first word, and he always says everything that I'm going to say. That's the problem, but that's why we're partners and working together. No, I mean, I can tell the story of the Bezos Earth Fund. We came in, we have a program around transforming food, and we look at climate and nature benefits as kind of our means of prioritizing, then go about doing it, putting people at the heart of that solution. When you use that equation, climate plus nature with people as the agents of change, you immediately land on a very few topics in the food system where you really have that working, and one of them is food loss and waste. And that's because it's insane that we lose so much food. It's insane that we waste so much food, and the emissions that that's creating, the land footprint that has, and whilst at the same time having people hungry, food availability and accessibility issues throughout the planet. I mean, it's just one of those things, something is seriously not working when this is happening, right? So it's such a compelling case. And so, yeah, we're very interested in this food loss and waste equation. You look at the numbers. The one I find amazing, and it's still, I was laying in bed at night thinking, how is that so? But if it was a country, food loss and waste would be the third biggest emitter, right? What? I mean, it's crazy. So we have to look at this, and there's far too little attention on food loss and waste. I do think it's a solvable problem. It's unlike in the climate agenda, almost everything that's going on has incumbent power that you're fighting against. In food loss and waste, only a very few, and it's a very sinister idea of people who actually make money from losing or wasting food. That power dynamic that you should be going against hopefully doesn't exist in food loss and waste. For everybody, this is a win-win. This is, by wasting or losing less food, you are going to make more money. And that applies to pretty much everyone. We don't need to shift the balance of power. We just need to do it. We just need to get going and do it, right? So that makes it very compelling as well.
Thank you, Andy. Andy, the second question is happening the same with methane emissions and is getting more and more important for that. Our, of course, partnership with the Global Methane Hub and the work that we are doing. Where is the connection between food loss and waste and methane? What are you seeing from the Bezos Foundation?
Yeah, so as Marcelo said, the methane equation is particularly interesting. We keep joking with Marcelo, we're the biggest funder on methane, right? See, you heard it from Marcelo. We're taking it very seriously. Methane is critical. And I kind of like to think in the food loss and waste space, it's a double whammy squared. So if we can reduce food loss and waste, it's a double whammy because first of all, you're saving the emissions, the energy, everything that went into producing a food that is then hopefully not being lost. So you're saving that input emissions, CO2, N2O, some methane potentially on the protein side. So, so you're saving that. Second, you're avoiding the methane then when it gets thrown on a landfill or gets decomposed. And so you're avoiding a methane emission. And it's squared because it's methane, and methane is way more important right now, 80 times more impactful in the next 10 years. There is no chance of delivering a 1.5 pathway or even a 2-degree pathway unless methane is severely reduced. And so this is the means of buying time almost for us to solve all the CO2 stuff. And so for me, methane and kind of the food loss and waste thing is this double whammy squared. You're getting kind of 3 times or more value for money by addressing this one.
We know now that methane is the fastest way to reduce greenhouse emissions, as food recovery and redistribution is the fastest way to reduce food loss and waste. You were in Cali with me, and we were visiting the food bank in Cali, and knowing the amazing work that the food bank is doing. Your takeaways from that visit?
It was an eye-opening experience. If none of you have been to a food bank, go back to your countries and your cities. There is probably a food bank in it. Go and see it. It is quite a phenomenal experience. I was expecting to see lots of food, and I did. There was tons of food, but I wasn't expecting to see washing machines and clothes and all of these. So that was. I mean, it's not just about the food. It's a redistribution of goods and services. Well, goods that people need. I mean, it is an absolute social safety net. It's a livelihood issue. That's the one thing. But more than that, what I wasn't expecting to see is a highly optimized, perfected logistics system, which the volumes were just insane. And you had these trucks coming in and all these like masses of stuff coming off the trucks, and then it all just like people running around like ants, moving it, processing it, and then cars pulling up and it all getting shipped in cars and off again. I mean, it was phenomenal to see the logistics behind that distribution, right? And again, it's just, I mean, I was talking all about, the double whammy squared of emissions of CO2 and N2O and methane and all of the climate side of things. I haven't talked about the nature benefits as well of shrinking our food system and freeing land up, but then also all of the social benefits that these things are having. I mean, yeah, it's just everywhere you look, it's like a win, 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 win. And I find it very hard to understand why there is not more attention and more funding going into tackling food loss and waste.
Absolutely. One of the findings that we are working with the Global Methane Hub is the correlation between, of course, the emissions benefit, that the reduction, but at the same time, the social benefit that are when we are doing food recovery and redistribution that are getting more and more important. And I think something that you were mentioning, and is we are not just losing kilos, we are losing food, and food has value, and the value is correlated to the hunger and poverty issues that we are facing. We are talking about 800 million population that is experiencing hunger. Then, Andy, thank you very much. Just a question. Who had not been at a food bank? Everyone knows a food bank? You haven't? Okay.
Yeah, there's one. Go.
Let us find you at the end, and we are going to find your closest food bank. Thank you, Andy.
Let me just do a plug, and maybe other will talk about this, but we did launch 2 days ago. Is someone else going to talk about this? No, you should do it. I don't want to steal their thunder. Huh? we have flyers and everything. Well, anyway, we launched a roadmap for philanthropic investment. It could be any investment in food loss and waste. One of the challenges we had as a funder in this is it's a compelling idea, but that next step of, well, what do you do about it? It's highly it's contextualized. It's not so easy to figure out the next step. It's a very compelling thing to do. That next step needs figuring out. So this philanthropic roadmap kind of lays out what is that next step in a few countries where we think we can have planetary level impacts with small investments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy. Okay, we continue the conversation. Good morning again. Are you still awake? Thank you very much. I would like to invite Ivan, from the co-founder and interim CEO of Food Cloud. Please, Ivan, thank you. Jaime Giacomosi, Climate Change Mitigation Analyst, Office of Agrarian Studies and Policies at the Chilean government. Thank you, Jaime. Claire, hi. Good morning. Senior Advisor, U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate. Victoria de Bourbon, Food and Agriculture Transformation Lead, World Benchmarking Alliance. And to finish, Marcelo Mena, but not least, the CEO of the Global Methane Hub. Thank you very much for being here. Allow me, thank you. The first question that I have is, I would like to introduce yourself, what your organization is doing, and the connection between methane and food loss and waste. Victoria.
Sure, shall I kick it off? Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. So at the World Benchmarking Alliance, we look at what the private sector is doing on a lot of issues on food systems, including food loss and waste. So we've made an analysis in 2021 and now have just launched a new report assessing the progress since on 2023. And food loss and waste is big on the agenda. But so if you look at 350 of the biggest multinational organizations, we've only found 10 companies that have sort of a top score on food loss and waste. And I thought I'd just quickly call them out because it's just 10. It's Auchan, Danone, 4 Farmers, ICA Group, Kellogg's, Metro, Tesco, Unilever, Walmart, and W.M. Morrison's food supermarkets. So as you see, it's quite a lot of retailers and not so much on the upstream agriculture side of the matter. So that was one thing that really sprung to mind. The other one is that we actually, in these 10, we had 4 companies that had top scores in 2021, but now dipped down. So it's very little progress, even that the companies that were leading have. And what do they find the most difficult is the reporting part. So quite a lot have targets aligned with the SDGs, with 12.3. Quite a lot of companies have also strategic partnerships with different different stakeholders in this area. So you have the Champions 12.3 network, but you also have other examples from the Consumer Goods Forum and also the WRI, food loss and waste targets. So there's lots of means and lots of gathering, but very little concrete progress and action. And it's interesting to see that especially supermarkets and retailers were on the forefront to drive this and trying to bring other brands along. But if you look at the full value chain, my goodness, there's so much to do. And as we've seen, this is really should be one of the top priorities. So very keen to also hear other thoughts on how we can make that happen.
Victoria, thank you. Claire.
Hi, everyone. Claire Henley. I'm a senior advisor in the U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate's office. It's a mouthful every time. We, 2 years ago, along with the EU, US and EU, launched the Global Methane Pledge with the support of many organizations, and now supported by the CCAC, Climate and Clean Air Coalition, who provides secretariat services to the pledge and is doing excellent implementation work. And the Global Methane Pledge is focused on recruiting countries to commit to a global reduction of methane by 30% by 2030. The goal is one thing, and now we are moving very intentionally to focus on implementation. And part of that implementation, and one of our priorities, is food loss and waste. On that front, we are focused on working through U.S. institutions, U.S. agencies like U.S. Agency for International Development. This just a few months ago, we announced $10 million to expand a food loss and waste accelerator through USAID, which is focused on supporting micro, small, and medium enterprises that are reducing food loss and waste in target countries. So it's one kind of specific example of how we are able to kind of leverage the interest and attention on methane to do things that have all of these other incredible co-benefits. And one of those areas that we're really interested in is food loss and waste. I think something I'm interested in talking about and understanding more about is, from the perspective of those who've been working on food loss and waste for a long time, how can the attention on methane be most usefully leveraged to impact this issue? In particular, I think the kind of mainstreaming within international financial institutions to increase attention on this topic, but also engagement with the private sector. So great to be here.
Thank you, Claire.
Thank you. Well, my name is Jaime Giacomosa. I work at the Ministry of Agriculture in Chile. We are, for us, we are beginning the journey, I think, on methane in agriculture. We are just working on our first national strategy for mitigation in the agricultural sector, which is a big challenge for us. So in terms of food loss and waste, we are just beginning these conversations with the health ministry and other actors and on how to tackle this in a coordinated way, especially because we have a lot of gaps in terms of data and information in order to build models for estimating methane mitigation potential and another more quantitative area of this strategy. So we are starting to working on that. In order to hopefully on the next strategies and updates of the plan, we can include concrete measures on terms of not only methane reductions in the livestock sector and manure management, etc., but also with more focus on food loss and waste. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaime. When having in mind that you are the only food banker that is on the panel, can you start by explaining us how a food banking works?
Yeah, so hi, my name is Aoibhinn O'Brien and I'm co-founder of Food Cloud, which is a food bank in Ireland. So we redistribute surplus food from the food industry to community and voluntary organisations. And I suppose we do that in two ways. We have a logistics and warehouse solution, so we have 3 warehouses across Ireland, working with over 200 food companies and redistributing food to over 600 community organisations. But also we have a technology platform that links retailers direct and food service and trialling with farmers directly to charities. So rather than bringing everything back to a warehouse, connecting the surplus directly to the charities that can use it through a technology platform. And through developing that, we now work in partnership with food banks in other countries, like in the UK with FairShare, Czech Republic and Slovakia, where they have the warehouse and logistics but not the tech, so we provide that. And more recently, we have had our first donation as of last Thursday in Kenya, where in partnership with GFN, the Kenyan Food Bank have a warehouse, but they don't have the technology, so we support them with our technology platform so that they can grow and accelerate their impact. So that's what we do. We're about 10 years old, so we're, 10 to 12 years in this area. And I suppose for us, the reporting is really kind of key and interesting in terms of continuous engagement of the private sector and trying to get more donor food industry partners on board, trying to make sure that through our technology and our data that we're giving back and evolving our data in line with all the ESG reporting standards, and how can we do that to get more companies to really commit to this. So that's what we do, and really delighted to be here.
Thank you very much. Marcelo, it's been an amazing growth on the investments in the methane, the work that you are doing and all the organizations are doing around the topic. What we need to do to continue having this type of investments, and based on your experience and knowledge, what we need to do to increase the amount of investment in the food loss and waste space?
Great. So I think if you think about big numbers, the amount of food that is donated and goes to a food bank is very small in comparison to what it could be. So we need to have a policy environment that prevents the perverse incentives to destroy food instead of donating it. And we need to overcome some, including sanitary regulations that are probably more conservative than they need to be, given the nature of the good faith donation that you want to have from companies. But I do think that to have more investment also, and we need the international financial institutions to support this, and this has very much come in the sort of a voluntary aspect, sort of a charity aspect, but it's something we need to do more mandatorily. And I think as you've seen, Cali or Sao Paulo have very good logistics. This is a very sophisticated logistical, even more challenging logistical operation than the typical food distribution. So I think we really need to get them more resources. And it can't be philanthropically funded. It can't be voluntary, I believe. I think it needs to be part of the responsibilities that companies have. And that's why I'm saying this sort of the same way that we force companies to recycle with extended producer responsibility regulations. This needs to be something that it can't be like we can't suffice just to have them report on Scope 3 emissions. It has to be using mandatory regulations, and that will really raise that up. And then, having the Amazons of the world and others be participating in their logistical chains to be able to help this agenda.
Absolutely, ready for that. We are ready for that in GFN, of course. The coming years are going to be very critical. 2030 is just around the corner. What things should happen to make the things change? What we need to do to reduce food loss and waste? In GFM, we are proposing to move from 1%, that is the amount of food that we are recovering, to the 5%. 5% is a huge number. From your perspective and your organization, what needs to happen?
No, I fully agree with what Marcelo says. I think, especially for the private sector, we need much more pressure. But until we have policies and other things in place, as a community, we can also do much more. And so I'd say accountability and increased finance. So accountability with already the existing measures. We see that so many companies have an SDG-aligned target. So many companies are in partnerships. So why aren't they realizing the progress that they should? Why aren't they reducing the numbers as they should? We must push that agenda collectively. We must have a collective voice to push for that accountability on the private sector. And secondly, finance, increased finance. We see a lot of, in our assessments, we see a lot of sort of initiatives from, as I said, supermarkets, more the consumer-facing companies doing their bits and efforts. That needs to be scaled up massively. But those things indeed immediately bring back a cost benefit. I'd say investments need to go for the upstream, need to be in the agriculture space, cold chains, infrastructure, access to market. There's where massive losses are held and where really the investments should be centered to realize that progress. So I'd say accountability and finance.
I think there's a lot of different things that need to change, but let me just speak to one of them. I think that there is a usefulness to think about methane separately from CO2 impacts, and to use the short-term importance of methane to drive greater attention and action in the coming years, as opposed to thinking about where we need to be on CO2 by 2100. And I think many of the international financial institutions, bilateral development aid agencies currently do not even track their methane impact. They have no idea what they're doing on methane, and they have no idea whether it's sufficient, insufficient, compared to the other climate work that they do. And so I think one lever that can be pulled is disaggregating the way in which we have simplified climate impacts, so that we can pay closer attention in the immediate term to short-lived climate pollutants to kind of give us this, best chance to bend the warming curve. And I think food loss and waste, when we do that, will absolutely rise to the top of the interventions that we should be focusing on. And in a lot of this development finance work, I think it will attract much greater attention. My hope is that it will attract greater attention in coming years.
Thank you. We have private, public, philanthropic organizations here. We are going to open after a space for questions, just if you want to do. Jaime.
Thank you. Yeah, I think from our side, I think it's two things I think are important that needs to happen to accelerate this agenda. I think on the one side is the data and information gap that we have, particularly on farm level information. So we can use that data to build estimations and more concrete mitigation actions and include them on our strategic plan. So, and the other area, I think it's we need to increase coordination and work together with other agencies and also with the private sector and NGOs and academia. In Chile, we have a national committee on food loss and waste that is the ministry is leading. And the conversations is not sometimes are not very productive, and we start to discuss on other topics. So I think make that conversation more efficient will lead to better outcomes in terms of we can discuss regulatory aspects and other things that we can advance. And yeah. I think at this time, the conversation in Chile, at least, is more focused on the social benefit of food loss and waste reduction. Yeah, we need to include the mitigation aspect and reducing emissions as well in the discussion. I think that will be a step forward in our work on mitigation in agriculture, definitely.
Thank you, Jaime.
Hi, I'm going to talk maybe from the food bankers' perspective in terms of what we need to happen. So I would agree, again, Marcelo speaks a lot of sense, but in terms of company responsibility and company engagement, that is number one. So like we do have a lot of engagement from the big brands, but obviously with only rescuing 1%, there's a lot more that could be done, and I do think that it has to be less voluntary because that's only going to get you the quick wins. So that is, I would agree, Marcelo, there. Reporting is really important in terms of a lever, data and reporting back to the companies. Digital transformation, obviously, in terms of using technology and data to try and rescue more efficiently with, I suppose, the support to logistics and transport, but underpinning all that is financial. So I think it's fair to say that all of the food banking community are very much in the kind of philanthropic charity space, and to really scale and get to that 5%, you have to get more finance more quickly, and there's only so far that the philanthropic charitable funding is going to take us in terms of the transformation that we need. So there's a lot there. Like funding is obviously key, but companies reporting and using technology, AI, to try and increase and get us to that 5% is going to be a big challenge. But I think we can do it.
Thank you.
So the ag sector, sometimes they like to say that they're carbon neutral because they like to take into account the forest that they manage, but it's certainly not. But it doesn't have to be a conflict. Many times there's things that you could do that are within the ag ministry's priorities that benefit the food loss and waste agenda, and so that's why it's really important first off to show what can be done. And for example, now we're working with the MDB to look at what can be done on ag sector dairy that could bring benefits in a country that doesn't want to talk about methane at all. But we could make a lot of progress because the mastitis, for example, reduction could get more milk to market. The improved productivity of animals to increase fivefold, could also increase reduce the methane emissions overall and the demand for land. So there's many other things that we could do and find the local incentives. I think that's going to be the big elephant in the room is that sometimes the ag sector does not believe that they have many things to do to contribute to the climate agenda on the mitigation side. That's only an adaptation thing. And I think politically, that's going to change a lot of things. And if we're able to really thread that needle, and I think we're getting there, we'll get the support. Otherwise, it's just going to be not going to have all the incentives that they would want to move ahead.
Thank you, Marcelo. I will open the space if you have any questions. Yes, of course. Just give me. Sorry, Marcelo. Maybe you can go this one.
Thank you so much for this very interesting topic for us as food system actors. I am Fatma Al-Hassan from Sudan, the national convener for food system. My question is that, as we know that there is food loss and waste all through the food system value chain. So how we can address the whole value chain in an integrated manner? This is one. Because, for example, in Sudan, we have a study on food loss and waste. We find that from production till the market, consumers, the whole value chain, we lost about 30%. And this, if we reserve it, it will feed like 4 million people from stable food crops. This is one. What we need, as you said, what we need to reduce food loss and waste, first we need a strategy. From here I request the food bank to let the countries who have a huge percentage of loss and waste to develop a strategy how we reduce food loss and waste, how we have awareness campaign for all food system actors about how they can reserve the food during the value chain, finance, because some countries, I think they need finance to do all these activities to reduce food loss and waste, and thank you so much. And even a last question, how we can join this network? Because it is very important for us here. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Someone wants to do a comment?
We're based in Ireland, and I'm going to call out David here, but I think the best example that we've seen of an integrated approach is in the UK with RAP, where they bring all the stakeholders together and look at each step of the supply chain, of which one very important one from our perspective is the redistribution. But I think you need a coalition of partners that go from farm right through to consumer, because at each stage of the supply chain, the reasons for food loss and waste are different. So there is an integrated approach, but there are different solutions. And obviously food redistribution being one very important one, but consumer awareness, farm level, better access to markets, it's all part of the one system. So that would be my perspective of it.
Thank you. We have other question. 2 more questions.
Thank you. My name is Yobel. I'm from Gaia, Global Alliance for Incineral Alternatives. We are 1,000 organizations, grassroots, globally, and also individuals. We've been working on plastic issues for quite some time. And then we've seen that how our members in many countries, they are facing an issues of governance. As you said, there's a lot of interconnectivity, and the government are, in a way, looking for ways to collaborate. And one issue that we've seen, for example, in the plastic issue, when we try to introduce the reuse system, there's a lot of confusion between who's taking care of this, because it's partly the Food and Drugs Administration, and also partly the environment and logistics. And then, for example, we've been working on composting, and one of the key issues is really to move the compost and collaborate with the agriculture sector, but they're not talking to each other. And another example is the packaging. Like, there's one attempt by Ministry of Environment Indonesia that tried to push the prevention of food loss by introducing single-use packaging in plastic. So it's an unintended consequences. So my question is, how do you see the raising amount of funds can drive a governance system change? Because that's very critical, and I don't think it's very easy to do in less than 7 years, 6 years.
Thank you. Maybe Claire or Jaime wants to go with.
I mean, from our experience, I think, as I mentioned, we have this governance structure initiative, this committee on food loss and waste, but everyone has different interests and topics they want to raise, not always related to mitigating emissions or making more food available. There are other issues as well. So that has been a challenging in terms of how to focus the discussion and do things. In this committee, there are a lot of actors involved: wholesale, markets, and health ministry, us, and other actors. So I think for us, make more visible the benefits for each of those actors involved is key to focus that discussion and try to work together and not all in a separate way, just trying to get your agenda. I mean, I think. And with that coordination and more focused discussion, I think things like finance and advancing in regulation could be much more rapid and effective.
Thank you. Claire?
I'll just add one thing, which is to say, I think the U.S. just came out with a draft food loss and waste report, and one of the things that I think was one of the best characteristics of the report was that it was across the whole government. So it was USDA and EPA initially starting it, and then the White House stepped in and took it as a full kind of interagency, cross-governmental report. I think that type of engagement across ministries, across agencies, can be so important within issues, but it also broadens the aperture a little to make sure as you engage more ministries and more agencies, people pull in additional topics like plastics, they pull in additional topics like circular economy, and I think that integrated work across the government can really help with making sure that we're not having all of these unintended consequences that are so common.
Thank you, Claire. We have time for 2 more questions. Let me just go with the lady. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Really interesting panel and discussion. I'm Tracy Mitchell with RTI International out of the U.S. And my question is whether you've already started or whether you're thinking about linking some of the food loss and food waste activities with carbon markets. For example, like for a food bank to be able to tap into voluntary carbon credits. If there are measurements already or a system to measure the amount of reduction in food loss and waste, are there methodologies within the carbon markets? And if not, do you think that's a direction that would be worthwhile?
Thank you. Let us take that question and we come back to the panel.
Thank you very much. I am Musa Sow, a young farmer, and also a Gambian from a very small country. Basically, my questions. If you look at the statistics or data from Africa, particularly sub-Saharan Africa, about 16% of food produced is wasted, which costs the country about $4 billion. And we're still struggling with food insecurity. What would be your best advice to really manage, also have an opportunity to either process or the post-harvest management? What is really your advice? Does it have to do with a policy issue, or does it have to do with capacity or political will, of our leaders? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Marcelo, let's go with the carbon taxes and policies. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So for example, in Chile, we started with the carbon pricing tax and trade scheme to look at what carbon price was needed to be able to offset different measures. For example, lighting up those landfill torches, or maybe having a composting facility be funded by the tax and trade scheme. So yes, it works, but you have to have a methodology that's flexible enough for this to be done. I think it's high quality work that we could provide. So in China, the ETS scheme has a carbon CO2 equivalent capacity to be able to fund through the emissions trading scheme. And so the limitation will be the MRV system. Who's going to pay for it? And we are willing to pay for some of those MRV systems as Methane Hub because we believe they're going to be really important to unlock that finance otherwise, because it's a no-brainer, but nobody's done the math. So that's why knowing how much methane emissions are prevented from the food banking by category of donation is going to be really important for the integrity of the system. So yes, it is important.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Someone wants to answer the second question?
The second question is a bit harder for me, but the first question, we've actually just finished a piece of work on looking at the emissions by product category, and just finished that, and we'll contribute to GFN and the Methane Hub's work on that as well. So it is in train, but there's a lot of work to be done on the methodology. And then in terms of the systems change piece and the advice, I'm not sure from a governance perspective I'm the right person to answer that question, but it is a mixture of policy and capacity building and finance, but maybe some of the governance side want to take that one.
I can just quickly say that I think it's not easy, and we're all struggling with it. There are, in different ways with different proportions. Every government in the United States, for example, we are struggling with food loss and waste, but obviously the challenges and barriers differ by country, and the proportions and the areas that food loss and waste are coming from differ by country. And I think the engaging all actors to understand the impact, just as you so eloquently described, the impact on livelihoods, and the impact of that the wasted food could have if it were rescued, is a start. But understanding the impact of the status quo and engaging folks from organizations from across government and across the full sector and the full supply chain is the only way to move forward, because it is such a cross-cutting issue.
Thank you, Claire.
A short one, though, is important to consider. Soon there will be a TED Talk coming out from a woman named Tombo from Africa. She has set up decentralized energy systems, solar energy. And what they do is that they drive up the demand, because typically a solar PV system will only look at lighting and will not drive up the demand. But the business model actually works better when there's higher demand. And that higher demand can be met by refrigeration. And so therefore, some of the things they do is that they provide the refrigeration for example, fishermen, to instead of having to sell dried fish with lower cost, they could sell fresh fish that's cooled. And that has also a benefit to, for example, having better cold chain for communities that could get their market, their product to market with more efficiency. We're doing some projects in Africa, just starting out, to see if whether we could, for example, have this low food loss and waste community with a decentralized solar system. I think there's many things that could be gained there.
Thank you, Marcela. Victoria, Claire, Jaime, Ivan, Marcelo, thank you very much for being here in the first Food Loss and Waste Day at COP. Thank you very much. If you want to... I would like to invite Martina, our good friend from the Climate and Clean Air Coalition. Martina, thank you very much for being here, and please help us with the closing remarks.
Thank you very much. Fantastic. And thanks to a fantastic panel. It's a pleasure to be here with you for this really important day to address this topic. And my first point really is, and we heard that throughout the discussion, there's this importance to address methane. It's the fastest way to reduce near-term warming. And obviously that's a double strategy that is needed between deep decarbonizations and the systems changes that we need to see, and the action targeted on methane. And this COP clearly put the topic on the menu. I think we had a real change from, well, the methane moment, as we call it, at COP26, gaining momentum with the Global Methane Pledge, and now we see a real movement rolling out on this. Just to recall, the CCAC, the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, had put out a global methane assessment that gave rise, or provided this underpinning for this work, and that found that the agriculture is the highest sector in terms of methane emissions, 42%. there's a need to reduce, to be 1.5 compatible, there's a need to reduce methane emissions in the sector by 20 to 25%. So we're not talking about zero, right? And I just want to hold the thought because there's a lot of sensitivities around this as well. Something that hasn't come up as much yet, and I want to make sure that we have that in our minds. Methane is a precursor to ground level ozone. Ground level ozone is harmful for people's health and it impedes plant growth. And plant growth means crop losses. We see 5 to 7% of crop losses for staple crops. And here we talk about a food systems challenge. So we must act, that's pretty clear. And we can. We can, there are a number of measures that are out there that we know. They're proven technologies, they're practice changes. Some of that is not easy to implement because practice change means behavioral change. That's never easy to do. And then there are a few new game changers available as well with innovation, new technologies, and they're often a little easier to do because they're fancy new things. But there's an impact, we have to act on livestock, we have to act on, here there's a lot that can be done with productivity gains, we have to act on rice, where it can be a real adaptation measure because there's a water issue behind it, but sensitivities are recognized. And that's where food loss and waste comes in. It's one of the measures as well, addressing food loss and waste. But obviously, to address food loss and waste, that's not the only reason. Methane is not the only reason to act on this. We heard that. There's a social issue that's extremely important, food security issue. There is an issue around the triple crises. And honestly, it's an environmental and a moral imperative to act on food loss and waste. We focused quite a bit on waste, just one additional word on food loss. Obviously, there's a real opportunity to come through the cold chain and so on. And take action here. And on food waste, we heard it's important to avoid food waste from happening. And here the food banks are a key pillar in the actions. But then there are certain circularity aspects that we can harness as well if food waste has happened and we take it to composting and revalorization. There's a number of technologies out there. So just to say that. We heard quite a bit about we have to make that work with companies and for companies. I thought it was really interesting as a takeaway. Some of the big retailers have woken up, but there's more effort needed further upstream. That's what I heard. Targets have been set. Partnerships work, like the Champions 12.3, and we're happy as UNEP being part of that as well. But we need to work on getting concrete results along the value chain, and there's something around reporting as well. And I think, talking about reporting, that was the connection as well to the food banks. The more we know where it occurs, what happens in terms of food waste, the more we can actually get logistics right to have the distribution networks as well. And then the food banks as really a center of partnership between the farmers, the retailers, and the consumers, I thought was really interesting. We heard there's a target to go up from 1% to 5%. That's a good step in terms of scale. But obviously that requires help. Regulation, I heard, a real key point. Here looking at perverse incentives, looking at the health and safety regulations as well. The work on interagency cooperation came out quite clearly as well because it's a bit of a cross-cutting topic. We heard how important it is to get the financiers on board as well, that it gets out of charity, but that it becomes something that's really, really organized. And we in the Global Methane Pledge implementation, we work quite a bit on bringing out the methane content of portfolios, and that's really with the finance sector. And so maybe here there's an additional element that we can use and that can actually help bring things to scale. We heard about investment opportunities with the logistics, digital transformation. I think there's a real game changer here as well to make things much more effective and help us. And that can actually also provide us with the needed data to make the carbon markets work so that we have enough of accountability in the MRB in this. And my last point is about Climate and Clean Air Coalition. We're a partnership of almost 90 countries, over 90 non-state actors. We're also the Global Methane Pledge Secretariat. We have a support system in place to help along the lines of people plans and policies, people institutional strengthening. So we heard the question coming up, what can we do at home? Well, maybe you need someone to help you with the coordination across ministries, for example, or with driving a plan So we can help with that kind of direct support. Planning is a key thing that we do, help with policies, help with embedding issues into the NDCs to help unlock some of the climate finance as well. There's a window on projects on the ground. We're transferring, for example, black soldier fly technologies to different localities, improving that further. And there's a role in terms of influencing, both with regard to sector policies and action, also the high-level political, and you've seen some of this at this COP playing out quite nicely. And as well, and I want to end with this, on showcasing what works, and we've been really, really happy to have teamed up with the Food Banking Network when we held our annual meeting in Bangkok, and we brought people real hands-on experience to the food bank there, and we intend to do the same thing as we go to the next one in Nairobi. And this is part of growing the movement, telling the story of what works, and bringing people together. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Martina, and just a terrific summary, I think, of the first session. And I know a lot of people talked about the complications of acting on food loss and waste. It is such a local issue. It's happening across the supply chain. It's unclear a lot of times about who's responsible for what. And one of the things I think that we are so encouraged by at the Global Food Banking Network is that in the 50 countries where we have member food banks, that there are already embedded champions that are so committed to reducing food loss and waste, preventing it, redistributing what is nutritious and wholesome, and then finding other pathways for it, for that reduction. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Please join me in giving a round of applause to our panelists. We will be having sessions like this throughout the day. The next one will start in 30 minutes, and it's going to talk about food loss and waste and policy reforms. We hope you'll be able to join us as your schedule permits. Thank you.